Well, I think at this where the stage where I am with three restaurants and about to open a fourth in New Orleans, I think that the biggest thing that I guess I didn't anticipate when I was just starting out is I no longer really work in restaurants. I work in an office and I work on my restaurants. But the job has become way less about food and beverage and the things that originally excited me.
Good Monday morning. Have you ever wondered how successful and happy people got their starts? Every success story begins somewhere, often more humbly than you'd expect. I'm Leilani Brown, host of Your First Job, the podcast.
I am so excited to introduce you to my new friend, entrepreneur, founder, restaurateur, writer, human extraordinaire, Brooks Reitz. And he's joining us today on Your First Job to talk all things career, business, life, family, and what it is to be a founder in Charleston. Brooks, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Great intro.
You like that?
I'm thrilled to be here.
Did I capture all the roles, Brooks?
Yeah, you really did. I feel like a lot of people put me in a box as a restaurateur only, and I'm like, I feel like I do a lot of things, and so that's nice to get some credit for all of
Yeah.
the pies that I have my hands in.
I like that. I like that multi-dimensional, multi-sector athlete that you are. Somebody called me that once, and I thought it was a great compliment. There's one thing that I left out, and I'll give a little backstory for why for leaving it out, and that's you're a former theater kid. So I love your restaurants. In particular, my son and I have, and he's a theater kid, have a tradition whenever he's on a major break from school, we will have a meal together. But in Charleston, we have that meal together at Little Jack's, which is a delightful tavern that serves the best burger, I think, in Charleston. And we were having our traditional lunch and or meal. And you walked in, and we didn't know that you were the owner. You walked in with your wife, Erin, and your son, and you were doing much the same last day of school tradition as a
That's right.
family. So, and we
Exactly.
learned in that connection when I said, "Hey, uh, are you the owner?" And we love it here. And we started talking, and you had great interest in fact that you had a background in theater, and you had that in common with my son Maxwell. So also theater is part of your background. Was that what you wanted to do or be when you grew up?
Yeah, well, yeah, and I sensed in Maxwell the same. I feel like theater people we're a specific type, and
You are your own tribe. It is different.
totally, it's a niche tribe, and but I think it imbues people with a certain ability to communicate and a confidence, and I sensed that in your son, and I think that I've carried with me that skill set throughout my career. But when you asked if that was what I wanted to do, I have always been a creative person. I had a rap group when I was in junior high and high school. We would make movies. I would write movies with my friends. And when I went to high school, that's when I got into theater. And it wasn't the acting that I loved, but it was the world creation. And so what I really wanted to do was be a playwright. And I had intended to go to graduate school to study playwriting at the same school where your son goes to.
Mhm.
And I decided, because of a variety of factors, to not do that and instead pursue the restaurant business, which has given me a lot of that same ability to create, storytell, and world build that I was after.
Yeah, I get the sense of that in every single one of your establishments that I've had the privilege of visiting. You have a quote that I think is brilliantly crafted, that restaurants are theater. And it feels like you have curated an experience for your patrons, for your diners. How has a background in theater and playwriting served you in that way?
Yeah, I think, well, a restaurant needs to communicate a strong sense of self and a strong identity to the customer. And, you know, working in theater, writing plays, you learn how to communicate, and you know that you have an hour to 2 hours to tell a big story and give it history and give it depth and complexity. But you've only got those people for that amount of time. You have to layer in so many things. And so dialogue's just one of those, but set design, costume design, all that stuff factors into it. So I think, to me, storytelling is what attracts me to the restaurant business. It's not necessarily, I love food. I'm a huge cook, super passionate about food. But really, the thing that I love is creating the story, designing the restaurants, writing the menu, creating a playlist, picking out the uniforms, and then communicating to a team of people, which are kind of the actors, and I'm sort of the director, exactly what it is we are trying to relay through our language, our body language, the way we dress to our customer. And I think that all helps build a really strong identity that customers respond to and feel drawn to.
Yeah, it's no accident. And you will have to pardon the corny joke that I will tell about how many people went to school to study theater to be the best trained waitresses and waiters.
Oh,
in the
100%.
industry.
Yeah, I'm definitely like supporting that stereotype. But
That's so
there are lots of, some of the restaurateurs that I most look up to were former film or theater people.
yeah.
And I do think it just makes us it helps us understand how to tell a story and how to communicate with an audience.
Can you talk about growing up in and around restaurants, and also particularly in the South, and what hospitality means to places like Memphis and Louisville and now Charleston?
So my dad had worked in the restaurant business and had his own bar in Memphis, Tennessee.
Mhm.
Then he sold that bar and moved to Indiana and ran restaurants and bars. He met my mother, they got married, had kids. And after my older brother was born, before I was born, he left the restaurant business completely,
Mhm.
and started selling insurance. And so I didn't grow up around restaurants.
Okay.
He was an insurance salesman and my mom was a teacher. But what I grew up around was, first of all, his war stories of owning a bar or managing restaurants, some of which were kind of terrifying and others were glorifying those days. And so I grew up with a sense that, oh, that's what my dad he used to do, and it's what he clearly kind of wishes maybe he still did. Um, and I also grew up in a house where entertaining and hosting was very much part of the fabric of the home. Um, my parents loved to have friends over.
Mhm.
Ours was always the house where my friends would come. We never really ate out in restaurants. My parents cooked. And so I grew up in a home where entertaining, hosting, food, music was very much part of the alchemy of the home. And I think that is what that combined with kind of hearing about my dad, my dad's younger days, is probably what pushed me down the path of that
Yeah.
I'm on now.
Yeah. We like to dispel the notion of overnight success on this show. I think that there's this microwave version of success that exists, maybe popularized on social media, about getting to that place. You own several corners in Charleston. You are also the founder and the creator of a consumer product, the Jack Rudy cocktail.
Mhm.
You've had different iterations, but you started as a busboy. Was that your first job?
So my first job was, um, picking weeds and gardening and helping one of my mom's friends at her house. And I would work on the weekends. She would come pick me up. I would go to her house. She'd kind of tell me, haul this mulch over there and spread it around, pick these weeds. And I probably made $5 to $8 an hour. I'm not really sure. So I did that. And then when I was 15, I got my first kind of official job where I was getting a proper kind of paycheck on a check. And I went to work for the newspaper in my hometown in Henderson, Kentucky. And this is the craziest first job ever. I wrote the obituaries for my newspaper. And I also published a column every Thursday they had a little insert in the newspaper that was called the Gleaner Junior. And it was written by students in the area. And I had a technology column every Thursday where I would talk about like famously still friends of my parents will joke that I introduced Google to my hometown because I wrote about it in this little technology column before anybody else had written about it. So I'm still like,
you really probably may have.
That's what they say. So I was like into the internet and into technology. And so though that was my first job, obituary writer and like tech columnist. But, of course, I was 15. So it's not like I was doing any hard-hitting journalism. But it was cool. I mean, I worked in the newsroom. I had my own little desk. I had my own computer. The obituaries, I had to call all of the funeral homes, get the information, put it into our format. It was a really neat experience. And as someone who's always loved writing, it was right up my alley.
Yes, absolutely. I wonder if writing obituaries, and I did not know that. That's fascinating. I'm fascinated by obituaries and the storytelling that we have to do about a person's life. Was there anything that ever jumped out at you or you remembered writing an obituary about a person that was just inspiring or made you say, I think I want to be like that?
Well, I wrote my own great-grandmother's obituary,
Wow.
who I was very close to. And she lived in our town. My mom and Nani is what we called her, were incredibly close. And we spent the night at Nani's house. She was a big, big influence on me. She was very much about manners. She was very much about dressing properly. I mean, she was old school. So, it was like tuck your shirt in, wear a belt. Your clothes need to fit. You need to look like a gentleman. And I was like, I'm like 11, 12, 13. You're like, oh, such a bummer. But I have carried
your hat off when you come in the house.
Exactly. Totally. Chew with your mouth closed. This is how you cut your meat. This is how you eat properly. And those lessons I now relay to my children. And I'm and manners are very important to me. And I got those from my great grandmother. And so that was, of course, a very interesting experience. That's the one I remember the most because even at that age, I understood it was quite an honor to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think there's some noni charm in your restaurants.
And for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But you had to have a job. Yeah, I know you had a job somewhere as a busboy. You had an early beginning.
Yes. So,
why did you take that? Because it's obvious. Let me just say this. Of course, yes. But there might be someone who is truly an aspiring entrepreneur and an aspiring restaurateur or cook or something that might dismiss that first job as a busboy, that entry level. Tell me about the job as a busboy, but tell me about what you learned about restaurants in that so-called small job or entry level job, because you probably are on the front lines observing all of the happenings of the restaurant and the customer's experience.
Yes. Well, so the next job I got once I could drive. So when I was working at the newspaper, my parents would take me to work. My grandmother would come pick me up and take me home. Um, and when I got my license and my own car, I wanted a job that paid more money. So I had a friend who was a busboy at the country club in our town, and he helped me get a job as a busboy. And I just think I've always had a very strong work ethic, but that was really that job, and in any restaurant job, is very customer facing. And so I started to kind of realize the importance of the difference in some ways between who you are kind of behind the closed kitchen door or at home, and who you are professionally, and the importance to project a certain level of professionalism, confidence, awareness when you are in a role that is so kind of immersed in people. um, and I think that was really like that's a big lesson I took from that experience. And I really enjoyed being a busboy, and took that with me to college. So I worked there for the rest of my high school years, and then when I went off to college, I thought, okay, well, I've worked in a restaurant. I liked, or a country club kind of restaurant. It wasn't a full service restaurant, but we were doing like weddings and things like that. So I thought, okay, I've got this experience. I'm going to seek out another similar kind of thing. And so my first job in college, I got a job at a bakery. And I was doing everything from icing donuts to working the cash register to making coffee drinks to doing dishes. I was a utility man at a bakery in Lexington, Kentucky, where I went to college.
Yeah. What would be the most surprising thing that aspiring restaurateurs, for example, would the thing that they would be most surprised to know about running a restaurant group, a hospitality group as you are building it? What would they be most surprised, good or bad?
Well, I think at the stage where I am with 3 restaurants and about to open a 4th in New Orleans, I think that the biggest thing that I guess I didn't anticipate when I was just starting out is I no longer really work in restaurants. I work in
Mm,
an office, and I work on my restaurants. But the job has become way less about food and beverage and the things that originally excited me. And it's a people job, it's an HR
yes.
job, it's a strategy job. And you've got to really have a strong stomach for, first of all, delivering critical feedback, and also delivering good feedback. But that's easy. Everybody likes delivering good
Right.
news. I have
Yes.
to deliver a lot of bad news, day in and day out. Maybe not day in and day out, but month in and month out. There are people that maybe are not performing, and they've got to be terminated, or prior to that you have to have hard conversations. So it's less about all the things you see in the restaurant, because I don't work in the restaurants. I have
Mhm.
managers, I have staff, I have general managers, I have a chief of operations. So my job is really, now it's about seeing where we're going, reading the tea leaves, communicating our culture, and kind of being the one to be out front, waving the flag, saying, this is where we're going, this is how we're going to get there, and these are the things that I see us doing that are sort of working against that goal.
Yeah.
So I think that's something to keep in mind for any aspiring restaurateur. There's a human element, there's a psychology element, there's you know, it's a people job. It's not really working with food and beverage and all the sort of fun, sexy stuff that people
Right.
think. At least not
It's a
as much
people,
as it once was.
yeah, people and experience creation, job, high touch in that way. Um, how did you gain the confidence to scale the way that you have?
I don't know if I'll call it lack of confidence, but like the self-doubt is still incredibly strong with me.
It's still there.
Um, I realize that nothing is promised tomorrow. And I think that that is what keeps me sharp and keeps my restaurants good, because I do not take it for granted one
Yeah,
second. I'm kind of
yeah,
like, Charleston is a very hard market,
it is.
super competitive.
Mhm.
Diners these days are they're more in, educated about food and drink. They're more opinionated. And, so I suffer a crisis of confidence sort of, often, but
Yeah,
at the same time, I know that the things that I do to keep myself sharp, eating in my restaurants, reading about restaurants and trends, and staying up on information that's happening in my industry, traveling and going and seeing what other markets are doing. That is how I kind of beat back any lack of confidence.
yeah,
I can walk into a room or a meeting and say, I have educated myself, exposed myself to as much as possible. So even if I may not feel like I have it nailed 100%, I think I've done more than a lot of my competition.
yeah,
And so that's what in those moments gives me confidence again, my
sure.
kind of preparedness.
We talk about imposter syndrome a lot on this
Yeah.
show and in our conversations and in our work, and I think it's uh, very pervasive. But you don't let it, obviously don't let it hold you back. Any lessons learned or confidence boost or self efficacy boost coming out of COVID, because your business survived what will create an indelible mark on our world for many,
Hmm.
many years. What did you learn, and how did it teach you about your own resilience as an organization and as a person?
Well, I think, yeah, that was a scary time, and the restaurant survived, and post COVID really thrived. And that experience sort of, um, I always assumed the way we operated, and I can kind of clarify what I mean. I always assumed the way we operated was good, but you don't, really know until you're really, really tested, until your systems are tested. Because Charleston has always been a good market. It's been busy. We have a lot of customers, a lot of tourists. Locals like to dine out. So when times are good, times are good. You have
Right,
your systems, but maybe your systems never really get stressed, because when a restaurant's busy, sales, they solve most problems. But when your sales disappear overnight, it really it magnifies those weak joints in your system. And so I saw that the way we operated, which was a lean sensibility toward, toward our payroll and positions that we have. So, like, I know other restaurants might employ a variety of people between the ownership and the restaurant itself. And there might be social media managers and just like so many things that we assume you've got to have. But we've always had this sensibility of let's make it work with the talent we have, until we really feel like we are about to like rip apart, and then we can layer in additional labor if we need, because labor
right,
is your massive expense in this business. So we
sure.
had run lean, and that helped us. And then I think also just having I have always been the one who is championing the culture of our organization and communicating that culture to my lieutenants. And I think the way that we lived up to the promise of what we say we're about in those moments, the way we communicated to our team, the way that we communicated to them through COVID, the way we kept on certain people and strategized. I think it just really proved that we walk the walk as well. that
Yeah.
that people do matter. I had to terminate certain people, like at high positions, who in the moment, understandably, were pissed, right?
Frustrated, stressed.
Yeah,
Yes.
super
Hmm.
mad, and not necessarily at COVID, but at me, which
Hmm.
I totally get that. But then I would call those people 3 days later after they'd just been effectively laid off and say, like I then was calling around to find out where can I get these people jobs. And like one chef who I had to terminate, I found a job at Whole Foods. And once we kind of came back online, he ended up taking a job somewhere else, but he communicated to me how much that meant to him. And he was angry in that moment. But I just, so for me, it was a great opportunity to show people like, hey, I don't just say that we have a good culture, or we care for our people, because you can, anybody in business, they're going to sing that from the mountaintops, put it on social media, so on and so forth. But I'm
Right.
like, we walk the walk. And I
You
think
try to live it.
that's what COVID showed me.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think you've hit a sweet spot actually for you're not you benefit from tourism. Charleston's the number for the 12th year in a row, the number one global destination in the US for global travelers,
Mhm.
and you benefit from hospitality from tourism. Uh but you also have a very loyal patron base from local people. So I think you're in that sweet spot. Um, you have a new venture that will soon be opening up. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah,
Different
this is
city,
my
another
first.
southern
Yeah,
city with southern charm.
sort of scary experience building this thing, or not scary, but it's challenging because it's in a new city, New Orleans, which is a city I've been to many times, but of course I don't know as intimately as I know Charleston. I have no real
Mhm.
network there. My business partner moved there probably about 8 years ago, and since then we have been batting around this idea of, New Orleans is a market with a lot of similarities to Charleston. Let's just keep our eyes peeled for a space that makes sense. And from being in my restaurants and where we are and the vibe of our little kind of neighborhood here, what we're after. We're not the kind of people who are going to go down smack dab in the middle of the French Quarter. So we needed to keep our eyes on like a cool neighborhood, a great building, and we finally found it. And so we are very close. I'm actually flying to New Orleans on Monday, starting some interviews. And we anticipate opening early November. And it's going to be kind of it will look and feel like a super cozy, classic kind of British pub. But the menu will have some inspiration from London and England, but will be just kind of a great neighborhood restaurant. Lots of seafood, some sandwiches, in the way that Leon's has a little bit of something for everyone without feeling like it's all over the place. We're
Right.
going to go for that same kind of thing in New Orleans.
Yeah.
An accessible, fun, great vibe, big patio, good drinks, great music, enthusiastic staff. I just think those are the pieces that you can put together and have a winning restaurant.
Yeah. I know of at least two or three people who are volunteering to be taste testers for you. My second to last question
Book
for
the
you.
flight.
I'm coming. I'm coming. Um, Second to last question for you is about partners, because there's probably no lack of requests to partner and collaborate. What do you look for in a potential partner, or even in talent, as you're trying to uh, staff up your organization and explore and experiment in new ventures? What are some of the qualities that you look for in people and in talent for and in your partnerships? What's a
it's
green
it's
flag for you?
integrity is the biggest. That's the biggest thing. I need to know that I can trust people, that I don't have to I want to go to sleep at night knowing that they're working hard for the business. I'm working hard for the business. No one is like trying to go through a back door to just get a little bit more piece of the pie. There needs to be trust, because, businesses, as you well know, when they become successful and they're generating income for people, and
Mhm.
in some cases, if they're very successful, a lot of income, that money can make people go squirrely.
Yes.
So there needs to be, integrity. And there's no test that you can give to somebody to figure out, okay, yeah, we tested their blood and they have integrity. It's a long period of getting to know someone. My
Sure.
partners here at these restaurants, we've been working together for 10 years now. I knew them for 8 years as friends prior to going into business together.
Hmm.
And I think over that time, you get a read, you see people in different situations, you see how they react, you see how they treat people, you see what kind of family life do they have, you see what their habits and hobbies are. And I think for me, it just kind of builds a picture of who that person is. I've never jumped into a business relationship with anyone I didn't feel like I had really properly vetted, um, because there are, you know, there are plenty of people out there with money who are willing to sort of say, "Hey, I want a restaurant, or I want to invest in a restaurant."
Mhm.
You've got to be really, you know, got to be really strategic about who you go into business with. And I've been
Yeah.
really lucky. My partner in Jack Rudy we've been together for 15 years. He's also my first cousin. So there is a family bond there that is, that imbued that relationship with an immediate sense of trust. But, family goes squirrely in business all the time. And that's been a great relationship. And then I have a new business partner here in Charleston on some ventures, north of where my restaurants are. We've purchased some real estate together with some plans for things, and it took me several years of communicating with him before deciding to move forward with that relationship. So
Right.
yeah, I think integrity is the big green flag I'm looking for.
Yeah, that's important. You have to be really discerning, and it takes time to get there. Okay, last question. You are, and I've said it before, a multi-sector athlete. And you have your hands still in a lot of different things, and I think more to come. Any advice for anyone listening at whatever point in their career journey about having it all figured out? Any advice or counsel that you can give to them about being allowing a little serendipity, allowing some dips and some turns, some failures and some redirections.
Totally.
What would you advise or counsel or encourage them to keep in mind and or think about?
I've been doing this long enough and I've been in business long enough to know that consistency of effort seems to me to be the paramount, piece of the puzzle. So I'll use an example, if I can, to illustrate my point about, my most recent venture, which is this newsletter that I write. It's on Substack. It's called A Small and Simple Thing. And it's kind of a lifestyle newsletter. It's about food and travel and, hotels and style and so on and so forth. And I started that newsletter 3 years ago, and I've been posting regularly once a week for 3 years. Um, in that time, Substack has become much more popular. It's starting to get mentions in kind of the broader media landscape. Lots of people have started Substacks. And I've seen lots of people start Substacks, write them for 3 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, and then stop and fall off. Meanwhile, I started with my 20 followers that I got, and slowly I just kept at it, kept at it. And it's easy when you're like writing to 20 people. It's easy to tell yourself, oh, no one's paying attention. I'm just writing for like my mom and my aunts and uncles. But
Right.
now I've got, something to the tune of, I don't know, I think it's 1,500 to 2,000 subscribers to this newsletter. And it's a meaningful side hustle, if you will. And I continue to write and I have bigger plans for it. But I've just learned that the person, assuming there's already a level of skill or talent or something that people will respond to, if you just keep at it, I feel like good work still in this country, in this environment, good work will be rewarded. I feel like. And so it's just important to know that it's a long game and there is no short path to success. I'm 40, but I've been working in restaurants since I was 16. And there is no shortcut. Certainly no shortcut if you come from just a regular middle class or lower middle class background. If you come from wealth, meaningful wealth, then there's shortcuts. But that was not my background. So I just think consistency of effort and knowing that it may take time, but if what you have is a good product or a good work ethic, or is something that is worth being discovered, then people will discover it. But you can't think that it's going to take 2 years or even 10 years. Sometimes it might take 20. But I just think stick-to-itiveness is it.
It is it. What a powerful and profound word to close this discussion with. Brooks, thank you so much for being with us and sharing a bit of your story. I'm hungry. I will be joining you at all of the
lunch.
I will
Just don't come to Little Jack's today with our free burgers.
Not on a Wednesday. That's over. But no, congratulations and continued success. And we'll be watching and waiting and expectant and just excited about all good things to come to you and to your family. Thank you so much.
Thank you. An honor to be with you. And next time we are together, I want to hear you answer all these questions. I want to hear about your path and your journey.
I will.
Thank you so much, Leilani, for having me. It was a pleasure.
Your First Job is a production of Giant Steps, LLC, a company working at the intersection of strategy, culture, career, and education. I'm Leilani Brown, CEO and host of the show. Many thanks to our executive producer, Sam Osborne, our production team at Relics Corps, and to Maxwell Brown for composing and producing our show music. You can learn more about our company and the podcast by visiting giantstepsllc.com. Thank you for listening.